Another singular peculiarity in him are the same kind as this. In his common intercourse of life and his familiar conversation, the emperor mutilated the names most familiar to him, even ours. Yet I do not think that this would have happened to him on a public occasion. I have heard him many times during our walks repeat the celebrated speech of Augustus, and he has never missed saying, "Take a seat, Sylla." He would frequently create names of persons according to his fancy, and when he had once adopted them, he remained fixed in his mind, although we would pronounce them as they should be 100 times in the day within his hearing. But he would have been struck if we had used them as he had altered them. It was the same thing with respect to orthography. In general, he did not attend to it. Yet if our copies had contained any faults of spelling, he would have complained of it. One day the emperor said to me, "You do not write orthographically, do you?" This question gave rise to a sarcastic smile from a bystander who thought it was meant to convey a reproach. The emperor, who saw this, continued, "At least I suppose you do not, for a man occupied with public or other important business, a minister, for instance, cannot and need not attend to orthography. His ideas must flow faster than his hand can trace. He has only time to place his points. He must put words and letters and phrases in words and let the scribes make it out afterwards." The emperor left a great deal for the copyists to do. He was their torment. His handwriting actually formed hieroglyphics. He often could not decipher it himself. My son was one day reading to him a chapter of the campaign of Italy. On a sudden, he stopped short and able to make out the writing. "The little blockhead," said the emperor, "cannot read his own handwriting." "It is not mine, sire." "And whose then?" "Your Majesty's." "How so, you little rogue? Do you mean to insult me?" The emperor took the manuscript, tried a long while to read it, and at last threw it down, saying, "He is right. I cannot tell myself what is written." He has often sent the copyists to me to try to read to them what he had himself been unable to decipher. The emperor accounted for the clearness of his ideas and the facility he possessed of being able to protract the duration of his application to the utmost by saying that the different affairs were put up in his head as in a closet. When I wish to interrupt an affair, said he, I close the drawer which contains it, I open that which contains another. They do not mix together and do not fatigue me nor inconvenience me. He had never been kept awake, he said, by an involuntary preoccupation of mine, and if I wish to sleep, I shut up all the drawers and I'm asleep. So that he added, slept when he wanted rest and almost at will. Tuesday, the 1st of October, when I entered the emperor's room, he had my atlas in his hands. He turned over several of the genealogical maps whose relation and correspondence with each other he now understands remarkably well. On closing the book, he said, "What a concatenation! How each part results from and corroborates what goes before it. How every part unfolds itself and remains fixed in the mind. Lysicazus, if you had done nothing more than point out the true method for instruction, you would still have rendered a most essential service. Everyone may now clothe the skeleton as they like, and will no doubt be improved upon. But the first conception is yours." Amongst the numerous subjects of conversation which followed, predestination was mentioned. The emperor made many remarkable observations on that subject. Amongst others, "Pray," said he, "am I not said to be given to the belief in predestination?" "Yes, sire, at least by many people." Well, let him say on. One may sometimes be tempted to imitate, and it may occasionally be useful. But what are men? How much easier is it to occupy their attention and to strike their imaginations by absurdities than by rational ideas? But can a man of sound sense listen for one moment to such a doctrine? Either predestination admits the existence of free will, or it rejects it. If it admits it, what kind of predetermined result can that be which a simple determination, a stop, a word may alter? Or modify ad infinitum. If predestination, on the contrary, rejects the existence of free will, it is quite another question. In that case, a child need only be thrown into its cradle as soon as it's born. There is no necessity for bestowing the least care upon it, for if it be irrevocably determined that it is to live, it will grow, though no food should be given to it. You see that such a doctrine cannot be maintained. Predestination is but a word without meaning that Turks themselves, the patrons of predestination, are not convinced of the doctrine, or medicine would not exist in Turkey, and a man residing in a third floor would not take the trouble to go down by the longer way of the stairs. He would immediately throw himself out the window. You see to what a string of absurdities that would lead. At about 3 o'clock, the emperor was told that the governor wished to communicate to him some instructions which he had just received from London. The emperor replied that he was unwell, that the instructions might be sent to him or communicated to someone of his suite, but the governor insisted on being admitted, saying that he wished to communicate directly with the emperor. He added that he had also a few words to say to us in private after having spoken to the general. The emperor again refused, upon which the governor retired, saying that he begged he might be informed when he could see the general. This period may be distant indeed. The emperor, with whom I was at that moment, having said to me that he was determined never to receive him again. After dinner, the emperor had Buffon and Valmont de Beaumont brought to him. He looked at these authors, say, respecting the diversities in the human species, the difference between a Negro and a white, but he was not much satisfied with what he found in them on the subject. He retired early into his apartment. He was unwell. The second, the emperor having told me that he was determined to apply again to the study of English, and that I must oblige him every morning to take his lesson, I accordingly went to his apartment at about 12:30. I was not fortunate in the choice of the moment, for he was lying on his sofa asleep after his breakfast. I must have vexed him, and he was very much vexed myself. However, he would not let me go away, and read a little English for about half an hour. He was not very well. He dressed, having told him that we were ready with what he had given us to do. He had first proposed to go to work on the chapters of the campaign of Italy, but he afterwards altered his mind and was busied the whole day on something else. At about 5 o'clock, he attempted to walk out, but found the weather too cold. After dinner, he tried to read, but in vain. He could not go on. He felt tired, sleepy, indisposed, and withdrew almost immediately. The third, after breakfast, the emperor took 2 or 3 turns in the garden. We were all with him. He spoke of the communications which the governor had to make to us, and took a review of the different conjectures, some good, some bad, which each of us formed on this subject. The weather was tolerable. He ordered the calash, and we went round the wood. The heat and the heaviness of the atmosphere, though the sun was obscured, obliged him to go into the house again. He sat down and dictated to my son until 5 o'clock. We again tried to take a few turns in the garden, but the air was cold and damp. He went indoors again and made me go to converse with him. He turned over an English book and stopped at a part relating to jurisprudence and the criminal codes of France and England, endeavoring to compare them. Everybody knows how extremely well versed he is in our codes, but he has little knowledge of those of England. And with the exception of some general points, I could not answer his questions. In the course of the conversation, he said, laws which in theory are a model of clearness become too often a chaos in their application, because men, with their passions, spoil everything they touch. Men can only avoid being exposed to the arbitrary acts of the judge by submitting to the despotism of the law. I had at first fancied it would be possible to reduce all laws to simple geometrical demonstrations, so that every man who could read and connect 2 ideas together would be able to decide for himself, but I became convinced almost immediately after that this idea was absurd. However, added he, I should have wished to start from some fixed point and follow one road known to all, have no other laws but those inserted in the code, and proclaim once for all that all laws were not in the code were null and void. But it is not easy to obtain simplicity from practical lawyers. They first prove to you that simplicity is impossible, that is a mere chimera, and endeavor next to demonstrate that it is incompatible with the stability and the existence of power. Power, they say, is exposed alone to the unexpected machinations of all. It must therefore have, in the moment of need, arms kept in reserve for unforeseen cases, so that, with some old edicts of Chilperic or Pharamond brought forward for the occasion, said Napoleon, nobody can say that he is secure from being hanged in due form and according to law. So long as the subjects of discussion in the Council of State, said the Emperor, were referable to the code, I feel very strong. But when they diverged from it, I was quite in the dark, and Merlin was my resource. He was my light. Without possessing much brilliancy, Merlin is very learned, wise, and upright, and honest, a veteran of the good old cause. He was very much attached to me. No sooner had the code made its appearance, and it was almost immediately followed by commentaries, explanations, elucidations, interpretations, and the Lord knows what besides. I usually exclaimed on seeing this, gentlemen, we have cleaned the stable of Ogius. For God's sake, do not let us fill it up again. During the dinner, the Emperor made some very remarkable observations respecting Egypt, which will be found in the chapters dictated to Bertrand. The Emperor thought that all he had seen in Egypt, and particularly all those celebrated ruins so much talked of, were not to be compared with Paris and the Tuileries. The only difference between Egypt and us was, in his opinion, that Egypt, thanks to the pureness of its air and the nature of its materials, preserved her ruins forever, whereas the nature of our European atmosphere would not admit of our having any for any length of time, everything being soon corroded and gone. Vestiges of 1,000 years' date might be found on the banks of the Nile, but not one would subsist on the banks of the Seine after 50 years. He, however, regretted very much that he had not caused an Egyptian temple to be erected at Paris. He should have wished to have adorned the capital with such a monument.